Good morning. We're going to wait a few minutes and make sure we have all of our guests logged in and in the meeting. So I am thrilled to finally be able to gather together with all of you again, virtually, you know, or in the galleries. I've been thinking about all of you and hoping that you're all healthy and happy and safe. Looks like we just about have everybody. Um, so I'm Jana Irwin. I'm the head of education for the Ulrich Museum. And I wanted to catch you guys up a little bit on what we've been doing over the past several months at the museum with all of the staff. So we made the decision to keep our galleries closed until spring of January of 2021, when we'll open all of our spring exhibitions and resume our public programs and all of our events and activities. But in the interim, we put together the Ulrich plus Artist plus You Community Billboard Project. And we selected significant works, 25 significant works from the Ulrich Permanent Collection, to place on 20 billboards throughout the throughways and neighborhoods of Wichita. And this takes place July through November. And so each month, new billboards go up. And they'll remain up through the end of November. And so our first 5 billboards are up. So please check the Ulrich website. We have maps of locations, and we've put together a number of supporting programs, book discussions that will start in August, and Spotify playlists that you can listen to. And we've also put together 23 virtual programs that will be taking place now through November. And this is our first. So I'm glad you guys are our test audience. So upcoming, those that are immediately upcoming, we will welcome Alice Aycock, a New York sculptor who created Twister Grande Tall that will be installed on the Innovation Campus August 4th. And we welcome all of you to drop by that installation throughout the day and join us in watching this amazing piece go up. It'll be the 81st piece in the Outdoor Sculpture Collection and our newest acquisition. So on July 28th at 6 p.m., we'll be joined by Alice Aycock, who will present a virtual artist talk. And then on July 30th, we will go in the studio with Wichita artist Patrick Dugas, again at 6 o'clock. So please join us for each of those. And go to our website, and all of our virtual programs require registration, just like you did for this one. So register, get in there, and it should be just a wonderful lineup of programs. So a little housekeeping. So at the end of the presentation today, I'm going to switch all of you to panelists, which will allow you to turn on your videos and turn on your mics, and for the Q&A following. And if you don't want to turn your video on, that's fine. Just turn your mic on, and you'll be able to ask questions and join the conversation. It might be easiest, we'll see how it goes, but there's a button at the bottom of your screen that says raise hand. If you'll raise your hand, I'll call on you to ask your question of Nellie. All right, excellent. I'm sorry, let me. So this morning, we originally had Nellie scheduled in April to present on her research on Alexander Calder that was in line with our spring exhibition On Vacation. We've moved that exhibition to April of 2021, but we thought we'd go ahead and have Nellie present this month. And her presentation is titled Littlest Show on Earth, Alexander Calder and the Spectacle of the Circus. And Nellie is a senior at Wichita State, and she'll be graduating this December, majoring in art history and minoring in French, music, and women's studies. And she's worked at the Ulrich as one of our Mary Joan Waid curatorial and education interns since last summer, June of 2019. And she primarily works on upcoming projects, doing research for exhibitions and other projects that we have lined up. And her area of interest is 20th century American feminist art. And Nellie has lived in Wichita all of her life, and she loves calling Wichita her home. So please help me welcome Nellie Elliott. And we'll see you in a little bit during the Q&A.
All right, thank you, Jana. So thank you everyone for joining us. Pull up my presentation here. All right. So like Jana said, I am going to talk a little bit today about the history of the American circus and the work of Alexander Calder that is about the circus. So I'd like to start off by talking about the beginnings of the circus. So the circus as we know it today is really a modern invention, but it does have roots in ancient civilizations like Greek and Rome and Egypt. So on the left here, I have an image of a practice in ancient Greece that was called bull jumping. And basically, this was where a person would stand and a bull would run at them and they would grab the horns and kind of leap over it. And historians don't know exactly what the purpose of this was. Some say it was some sort of religious ritual. Other think it was like a coming of age ceremony. But this is significant. Practices like this are significant in the history of the circus because it's an early example of how humans were starting to test their own physical boundaries and use that as a form of entertainment. And also the involvement of animals in practice like this is significant because once we get to the modern circus, we'll see that animals were a very important part of that form of entertainment. So on the right here, I have an image of Roman gladiator games. Also kind of likened this to the circus in a sense. In this practice, I'm sure a lot of you are probably familiar with it, but it was actually prisoners or slaves who were forced to do the performing here. So they were either forced to fight each other or fight animals. And this, again, is just an instance of humans testing their boundaries involving animals in some form of entertainment. So during the medieval and Renaissance periods, these practices died out a little bit. But during those periods, we see groups of performers and acrobats that are kind of similar to the modern circus, which we'll get to shortly. So by the 18th century, there were fairs and carnivals across Europe that were pretty similar to the circus that we know today. On the left here, I have an image of Philip Astley, and he is considered the father of the modern circus. So in 1768, he founded the first true circus as we would recognize it, and that was in England. He was a former military man and equestrian, so he started a riding school in England, and he would teach students to ride horses and to do these tricks on them. And as a part of his school, he started a show where he and his students would perform. And it started out just as like a riding show. They would, perform these tricks on the horses. But over time, it kept growing. And eventually, it featured acrobats and mimes and clowns and all those sorts of acts that we are familiar with as being part of the circus. One notable aspect of Astley's show was that he performed a circular arena. And this became characteristic of the circus. So he used the circular arena for a couple reasons. First, for the audience, it was easier for them to all see. You know, instead of being all lined up on one side, they could be all around, so they could see the acts better. They could also fit more people into the arena, and it actually benefited the riders themselves, because the centrifugal force of riding in a circle helped the equestrians to stay on their horses. So the circular format started out with Astley's school, but it continued all the way to the present, and it's you know, most characteristic elements of the circus. So this European circus format and traditions are really what mostly influenced the American circus. However, before organized circuses in the European style came to America, there were some forms of circus-like entry existed. So we had these pioneer animal traders who would capture, you know, animals from the frontier like bears and bring them back to town, and the townspeople would pay to see these animals. So we kind of see this precursor to the menagerie start to pop up in early America. There were also traveling groups of performers in America before the organized circuses came, but they were really they weren't, you know, organized companies like the circuses that we know. They were just kind of small groups of performers that would just, you know, come and go without any organization. In 1793, the first American circus was founded in Philadelphia by John Bill Ricketts, who you can see here on the right. And he was actually a student of Astley's school in England, so he was an equestrian. And he was the first to advertise, and he used the same name for his company in all the cities that he visited. He performed in an amphitheater that was constructed specifically for his purpose. So he had the first organized circus in America. And to note that at this time, the circus wasn't the popular form of entertainment that we know it as today. It was definitely geared towards the upper classes. It was kind of like visiting the theater or the opera. So it wasn't, you know, intended for the masses at this point. One of the famous stories of Ricketts Circus is that George Washington visited it at one point. So it was definitely, you know, intended for the upper classes still. However, over the years, more and more circuses started to develop, mostly in the Northeast United States, which became known as the cradle of circus. And so, you know, there were just all sorts of tiny circuses that started popping up all over America. And there was a saying in the early days of the circus that the easiest way to lose money was to try to start a circus. Um, so the conditions were really not great in the early days. I mean, there were no salary or labor regulations, and you know, the roads weren't great, so the travel was slow moving and dangerous, and did not succeed. Um, in the early 1800s, an American showman named Joshua Purdy Brown came along, and he pioneered the use of a canvas tent, like the one in this image here. And this became one of the most distinctive elements of the American circus for a couple reasons. First of all, the use of the tent allowed this kind of one night stand mentality with the circus. So before the use of the tent, circuses would go into amphitheaters that, you know, just were in towns, and they would stay there for a week. Now that they use tents, they could travel to tiny towns that didn't have the infrastructure that would have allowed them to come at an earlier time. And they could go to these small towns, and it really brought the circus to the masses. It was no longer just for the upper classes, it was for all people. And they would set up, play maybe one or two nights, and then go away. So it was the canvas tent really brought the circus to the people, and it allowed for this one night stand sort of thing with the circus. And that is one of the most distinctive characteristics of the American circus versus the European. So in the 1830s, Phineas Taylor Barnum, who I'm sure you all have probably heard of, began his career as a showman. And he is really the probably, if I had to choose one person from the history of the circus who made it, what it is today, who contributed to the circus, it would be Barnum. He originally was just a showman. He had all sorts of different things that he did before he had a museum, and he worked with singers to go on tour. But in 1871, he created his first true traveling circus. Um, and so he kind of dominated the market from the beginning. In 1881, he merged with James Bailey to create the Barnum and Bailey Circus. And this was when he started using the term the greatest show on earth. So Barnum and Bailey were definitely the leading circus at the time. Their main competitor was a man named Adam Forepaugh. And this is really the point in the history of the circus when we see this intense competition coming up between different circus companies. And so this is a poster of Forepaugh's Circus. And I think it gives you a little bit of a sense of how the competition between the circuses um, pushed them to try to mount these huge spectacles. They really tried to outdo each other. We see a lot of circus posters where they claim to have these just over the top acts that, they likely didn't actually have, but they were just claiming to so that they could attract an audience. And this really contributed to the growth of the circus because they were always trying to outdo each other. Forepaugh died in 1890, leaving the Barnum and Bailey Circus to be the dominant circus. But a new circus popped up shortly after that. So the Ringling Brothers founded a circus in 1884, but when they first started, it was just a tiny circus. The Ringling Brothers themselves came from nothing. Um, so like I said, there was a saying that the circus was the best way to lose money. Somehow, against all odds, the Ringling Brothers were able to succeed, and their circus just gradually grew until they became the biggest competitor for the Barnum and Bailey Circus. In 1906, the Ringling Brothers bought out Forepaugh's Circus, and then in 1907, they acquired the Barnum and Bailey Circus. So by the 1910s, the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey combined circus was pretty much it in the circus world. They were really the greatest show on earth because they had combined all of the great circuses in the market. So this is the circus that Alexander Calder encountered in the 1920s that kind of sparked his love for the circus. So we'll come back to that in a minute. But first, I'd like to talk a little bit about how significant the circus really was in American culture at the time. I know before I started my research for this project, I didn't really know a whole lot about the circus, and I didn't realize how significant it really was. But during the 19th and 20th centuries, the circus was really the primary source of entertainment for most Americans. The circus, like I said, they were traveling, so they passed through these small towns that didn't have access to other forms of entertainment. And remember, this was before TV or internet. So for the circus to be able to pass through these tiny rural towns was really a big deal. To put this in perspective a little bit, in 1877, on the Barnum and Bailey tour, they went through towns in Kansas like Atchison, Leavenworth, and Paola. So these were tiny agricultural towns. And the Barnum and Bailey Circus employed hundreds of people. So, I mean, there were instances where, for the day that the circus showed up in these towns, the population of the town would practically double because there were just so many people circus. The circus also was really instrumental in exposing Americans to new inventions. And we see this mostly in the early 20th century. They started including things like electric lighting and moving pictures. And so for many Americans, the circus was actually their first exposure to these new inventions that would become so important to American life. And it's really kind of ironic because film is circus out of business eventually. But in the early days, they, exposed the American public to it. So it was just, the circus was very instrumental in the development of American culture, and it just exposed a lot of Americans to things that they otherwise did not have access to. So I am now going to show you a couple videos of some of the leading circus performers. These are all from the 1920s, and they're pretty old and the quality's not great, so I do apologize for that. But this one is Mae Worth. She was one of the leading equestrians of the time. This is Lillian Liesel. She is probably the most famous circus performer of this era. She was a gymnast and acrobat, and she was known for this particular act she would do where she would hold onto a ring with one arm and do flips, and on each rotation she would actually dislocate her shoulder. So you'll see that about halfway through this video, you'll get to see that act. Okay, so this final video that I have is Alfredo Cadona. He was also a famous gymnast, and I'm going to skip. We don't need to watch the whole thing, but just to give you a little idea.
And ring up on the big tent for the show. Look, way up, 74 feet in the air. The flying Cadonas now offer dangerous, death-defying daredeviltry, or something. All right, Professor, music. Alfredo starts things by testing the apparatus and salutes you like this. Allez! Up. Alfredo travels more than 60 miles an hour. Hi! Now watch the pirouette before he catches the other bar. There it is. Next, Alfredo does 2.5 turns high in the air and is caught by his ankles. That is, maybe. There he goes. It's a matter of perfect timing, worked out to the fraction of a second. The pirouette. And there you have it.
All right. So hopefully those gave you a little bit an idea about what sort of acts were seen at the circus at the time. So we've talked a lot about kind of the fun side of the circus and the spectacle, but I think it's important also to discuss a little bit the darker side of the circus. The circus definitely exploited people for to attract audiences, and one of the most disturbing instances of this was the presence of the circus sideshow. So this was basically a museum of humor, and it got its name from, so it used to all, just be part of one circus, but then people started complaining. They would take their kids to see the animals and they didn't want them to have to see the human freaks. So they started a new tent, a separate tent that they called the sideshow. And you could go there if you wanted to see it, but it was separate from the rest of the circus. This is troubling reasons. Some scholars have pointed out that ironically, the circus did in a way provide these people with opportunities that they wouldn't have otherwise had. So they weren't forced to be there. They did choose to be there, and they were paid fairly. They were paid equally to what everyone else in the circus was paid. So they were able to earn a living and find kind of a community in a world that probably otherwise would just exclude them. But there's no getting around the fact that these people were exploited and called freaks, for the gain of the circus. We see the circus really kind of leaning into the darker side of humanity, I think, in several instances. Another very disturbing element of the circus was the racism, which was very, very much present in the circus. I have a couple examples here. So on the left, you see an advertisement for a woman named Joyce Heth. And this was actually how Barnum got his start as a showman. In the 1830s, 1835, he purchased a slave woman named Joyce Heth, and he marketed her as the 160-year-old nurse of George Washington. And he would take her on tours, and people would pay to come see her and hear her tell stories about George Washington when he was a boy. And she was completely blind, mostly paralyzed. And the tours were so hard on her that she died soon after. And upon her death, there was all this skepticism about whether she was really 160 some years old. So Barnum actually had her autopsy, he made it public so people could pay to come see her autopsy, which was, very disturbing for obvious reasons. On the right here, I have a picture of William Henry Johnson, and his stage name was Zip the Pinhead. And he was an African-American man who was billed by the Barnum and Bailey Circus as being the missing link in evolution. So it was just had him dressed up like this. He was supposedly completely mute, but the story goes that on his deathbed, he said, well, we really did fool them. So these are just a couple instances of how the circus really leaned into racism. It leaned into this kind of othering of people who were different in order to profit. So here, another troubling aspect of the circus was the treatment of animals. Um, the animals were a really crucial element to the circus, especially elephants and the big cats like tigers and lions. So here I have a picture of Clyde Beatty. He was one of the leading lion tamers at the time. And it was quite an ordeal to acquire these animals in the first place. The circuses wanted the young animals because they would live longer. They could be in the circus for longer. So many animals were killed just in a hunt for these animals, and then many animals died on the trip to the United States as well. So it really, it was not a simple thing to acquire these animals. Once the animals were in the circus, their treatment was, it ranged from being atrocious to, I mean, questionable at best. Um, Many of the trainers really did have a love for their animals, especially the elephant trainers, which I thought was interesting. There are a lot of elephant trainers who really did have a bond with their animals, but the animals were still, I mean, their conditions just weren't very good at all. They were confined to these small spaces. They were forced to perform. So by the mid 1920s, several small animal activist groups had popped up, and they started protesting the use of these animals in the circus. So in the mid 1920s, the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus actually did away with all acts involving big cats. So that was a step in the right direction, but just the treatment of animals is another thing to think about when we talk about the circus. So I'm going to move on now and talk a little bit about Calder Circus. But before we get to that, I just did want to mention that there are who have taken the circus as a subject in their artwork. I think the spectacle of it, the colors, the drama are really fitting for artwork. So here I have two paintings by George Seurat. On the left we have the circus, and on the right a sideshow. Here are two more. On the left we have Degas, Miss Lala at the Cirque Fernando, and on the right Toulouse-Lautrec with Equestrienne. So these artists were exploring the circus, but it's important to note that they were still doing it in the medium of painting. So they were adapting the circus to fit the medium. And we'll get to Calder in just a moment, but really what he did was he adapted his medium to fit what the circus was. And I think that's part of what makes his work really special. Okay, so just a quick overview in case any of you are not familiar with who Alexander Calder is or what his circus is. I'll just give a brief overview. So Calder was a sculptor active in the 20th century, and he's mostly known for his mobile and stubule sculptures. So here's one of Calder's mobiles. But before he got into that sort of sculpture, he created what is known as Calder's Circus. Here it is. And it's basically just a miniature circus that Calder created using found objects like corks, wire, cloth, wood, rubber, pretty much anything he could find. And it started out as just a few figurines, but it kept growing and growing to become this entire miniature circus. And eventually he started giving performances. So he would actually perform circus acts using these tiny figurines. So you might be wondering how this came about. Well, before Calder became an artist, he studied as an architect. So he was always drawn to building things with his hands. And he held several jobs during the 1920s that kind of led him to his circus. For a while, he worked for a toy company that produced something called the Humpty Dumpty Circus, which was basically a small children's circus toy set. And if you can actually see a complete set of the Humpty Dumpty Circus at the Miniature Museum in Kansas City. So go check that out. Calder also was always fascinated with animals and movement. In 1920, he produced a book of drawings of animals that he did from life at the Central Park Zoo. So here I have some images from Calder's book. So you can kind of see him working through this attraction to animals and starting to develop his style. But the most important job that Calder held during this period, as it pertains to his circus, was he was an illustrator at the National Police Gazette, which was a newspaper in New York. And in 1925, Calder was sent to Sarasota, Florida, to observe the winter training grounds of the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus. He spent 2 weeks there observing, sketching, and it was during this time that he really fell in love with the circus. After this, we see in his artwork, the circus just pops up everywhere. He did sketches, he actually did a couple paintings, and then of course he developed his circus. So it started as, his circus started, like I said, figurines he made just for fun. But over time, he started making more and more figurines, and he moved to Paris. I have a timeline here. He moved to Paris in 1926, and it was like right after he moved to Paris that he started performing his circus. He had considered putting his circus in a gallery setting, but he didn't think that that was quite the right setting for his circus, so he started out by just performing his circus at his apartment or at the apartments of friends. And it started out as just these small, intimate gatherings, but by the end of his performances toward 1930, 1931, it was this elaborate ordeal. He would actually send out physical invitations to people. He would set up bleachers and they would eat peanuts while they watched. It was timed down to the minute, and he had music that went along with it. So it really was this kind of performance art. And so Calder's circus was active between 1926 and 1931. And during this period, he was living in Paris, but he went back and forth between Paris and New York a lot. So he performed it in both of those cities. And it was also through the performance of his circus that he really became involved in these avant-garde artistic circles in Paris and New York. And that's where he made a lot of the connections with people in the art world. So that was very important to his future career. So I do have a short clip here of Calder performing his circus. This film was actually made in the 50s, but his circus, like I said, he performed it consistently between 1926 and 1931. And this is just a short clip, but you can actually see this full video in the On Vacation exhibit if you'd like to. So here we go. So Calder definitely drew on the real circus for his circus performance. But as you can see, there is definitely an element of humor to it as well. So, I mean, there are pieces falling off that he has to put back there. I think he kind of leaned into the humor of the circus for this piece. There's also, I think one of the things that attracted people to the real circus is kind of the sense of danger. Because, I mean, the acts that the people would perform were truly dangerous. I mean, if they fell, there are instances where the people actually died. But in Calder's circus, the stakes are so low because they're just toys, but there's still kind of this element of whimsy to it. He has, you know, these little figurines, acrobats, the same acts that people would do in the real circus. And there's even some speculation about whether he might have modeled some of his figurines after real circus performers. So he had, I think, might have been inspired by Lillian Liesel, who we saw a video of earlier. So he did definitely really, really draw from the real life circus in this work. Okay, so here I have a couple images of the drawings that Calder did that are featured in the On Vacation exhibit. So these are actually prints that were produced in 1964, but the drawings themselves were created in 1932. So Calder created these kind of right as and right after he was wrapping up the circus performances. So these are kind of, for Calder, a last exploration of the circus. And we see him back to drawing kind of when he feels stuck. So this is kind of an indication that he felt his interaction with the circus was coming to a close and he wanted to just kind of regroup, is kind of how I think of it. In these drawings, he depicts all sorts of things that are featured in his circus performance. So we see animals like the elephant in this middle picture, or horses, lions, tigers. We also see acrobats, like on the right here, we have a trapeze artist. In some of the other images, you know, we have other acts that would have been in his circus. So these were kind of just a final exploration of that theme. I just want to say a quick word about where Calder's circus is today. So right now, the Whitney has Calder's circus. It is on view. It's on the 7th floor in case you ever get a chance to see it. It's not, there are no performances of the circus, you know, to keep it conserved, of course. But it is all on view if you'd like to go see it. And there are some interesting videos on the Whitney's website about how they're preserving the circus, in case you're interested in those. But yeah, that's about all I have. So we want to open it up to questions now.
Thank you, Nellie. Nellie,
Thank you.
if you stop screen sharing, everyone, I'm going to have to go through you one by one, and I'll elevate you to panelist, and then you can join the conversation. So, and you'll get a notification that I'm asking you to turn on your camera or your So you have to be patient with me. You'll all join one by one. Almost there. Everyone joining in? There we go. Hi, Ksenia.
Hi, Joan. Hi, Nellie.
Hello.
Leslie. Well, so far we have the Ulrich staff. Where's everyone else? Oh, Carter. Hi, Carter.
Hey.
I'm almost done. Almost there.
Great job, Nellie.
Thank you.
All right. Do we have everybody? Slowly but surely. Oh, it's so nice to see all of you. We've missed you. Just wait a few minutes and get everybody in here. So before we jump to questions, I'd just like to take a survey and see, how did it go for everybody? The virtual program, did anyone have any problems?
I lost sound for about 5 seconds, but it was on my end. So I got a notice that my Wi-Fi was struggling. So you guys were perfect.
I had about 3 notices, yeah, that my internet was unstable.
Unstable. Right.
Unstable. Yeah. How about everybody else?
It worked great for me. I was on Wi-Fi and not a single hiccup.
Good. No problem with registration, no problem with joining the program. Nope. Everything worked well. Excellent.
Well, I will say that I wasn't clear when I got the registration what application we were using. It just said webinar, but I kind of recognized that it might be a Zoom address, so I tried Zoom.
Okay.
It might help to.
I'll take another look. Yeah, I'll take another look at the invitation emails or the registration emails that go out and make sure that that's clear.
Yeah.
For everybody. Thank you for sharing that.
I registered after the event had actually started, and it was really smooth about directing me directly into the webinar. So that worked well.
Good. Good. Well, does anyone have questions for Nellie? Thank you, Nellie. That was excellent.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Well, go ahead.
Jump in.
I was going to say I had a comment, not a question, but it's interesting to me that the Buffalo Bill Wild West shows were actually a contributor to the circus history as well. And be interesting to, if you're going to give the presentation again, you might consider adding a little bit about that, because that's
yeah, absolutely. There was so much that I wanted to add, but I just did not have time to, so I really struggled to condense it all. I just had to pick and choose. But yeah, absolutely, there are so many things that were influential and really important to the history of the circus. Yeah.
I have a question in connection with that. So I'm curious, when Calder goes to Paris and he is performing this, is what he is performing in kind of the circus in the form that he knows it, is it seen as a specifically American form of entertainment, or did France also have its own circus tradition and it kind of readily translated as just a really inventive way on riffing on the circus?
I think that it was perceived as American. I know that there were circuses in Europe, but they were quite different. So I know that the Barnum and Bailey Circus and the Ringling Brothers had traveled to Europe. They'd done international tours. So the I think European countries were familiar with the circus, but they still probably associated it with the United States. So yeah, that's a good question. But I think it was perceived as, American.
What are the remaining circuses, if any? I know there's been a lot of change in circuses because of animal rights and so forth. You alluded to that, but are there any of them left anymore?
That's a good question. I know that the Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey, I think they went out of business in 2017. So I don't know if they're completely gone. They might just be on a much smaller scale. But I don't think they're quite the traveling spectacle that they were. I think they are just much more scaled back. I think that there are a lot of smaller circuses, but it's nowhere near the phenomenon that it was in the early 20th century.
Oh, there's the Cirque du Soleil franchise, right? That's the big player in the circus world now. But I think they make a big point of not having any animals be part of it.
Yeah, so it does exist, but it's quite different. Yeah.
Yeah, it always bothered me to see these noble animals perform the circus acts. Performing dogs and those kind of things, that was different. But I liked the aerialists. Even though clowns are kind of creepy, I enjoyed the clowns. But seeing these noble animals perform circus acts always bothered me, even before I considered how they were treated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the hardest things for me also, watching all these old videos and seeing the old pictures. It's it's very troubling to see those animals being forced to perform that way. Yeah, and especially towards the end of the circus days, like in the 1950s, they were constantly trying to have these bigger and more spectacular acts. So, I mean, they would like put tutus on the elephants and just these ridiculous things that it just makes you cringe to watch. But yeah.
So, Nellie,
I'm not sure what Milani wants.
Nellie, have you had the opportunity to see the Calder exhibit at the Whitney?
I have not, but it's on my list now that I've done all this research.
I would think so, yes.
Yeah.
When we were watching Calder do his performance art, it wasn't so much performance art to me as watching some grown-ass man play with toys. And so I had to reconsider what I was watching there.
Oh yeah, no, you are not alone in that. There were a lot of people who felt that way and were very skeptical of the circus. And it's interesting because Calder himself said that when he started out, he was really just doing it for fun. He made the figurines, and then some of his friends told him he should put them in a gallery, and but he didn't really feel like they would fit, so he just kind of did these performances for fun. But then all of these friends of his from the art world started coming to his performances, and it kind of just grew into this whole phenomenon. And looking back, we consider it art and it's in the Whitney, but I think at the time I don't think when he started creating his circus he had that vision for it. I think it kind of just grew into that. So yeah.
But I do think it's also like it's one of the reasons because that work was important in the longer term is because he was looking to popular forms of entertainment for inspiration. One of his most famous pieces from that period is this amazing wire sculpture of Josephine Baker, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Who was a really important popular performer, and he found like a very modernist visual language to draw inspiration from popular art forms, and that combination of interests is like one of the things that we now see as kind of defining 20th century art.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, the kinetics involved and the intricacy of the the pieces, the high wire acts, making the trapeze artist go from one trapeze to the other and those kind of things. As an engineer, I found that interesting. I was trying to figure out exactly how he was doing it. And so that was cool.
Yeah, it's really amazing to watch. Yeah, like I said, he was an architect before he became an artist, so he was very mechanically minded, I think. Yeah, so we do have some videos of him performing his circus, but in some of the research that I did, the Whitney and their work conserving the figurines, they've actually found new ways that they can, new acts that he could have done that we don't necessarily have footage of, but, they're constantly discovering, these new little features of them that contributed to his performances. So it's really amazing what he was able to do.
Now, the Calder piece we have here in town, down at what used to be Bank 4, was that commissioned for that building? Was he still alive then, or was that a piece that was acquired from some other collector or something? Do we know?
That is a good question. I'm not sure about that.
I don't know, Jana?
I'm not sure. It was part of the bank's collection.
At least
they had a fairly significant collection. And when the bank left that, they chose the building. But how it was acquired, Don, are those your puppies?
They are.
Who's on there with the dog?
I tried to mute myself. Is my mute not working? I tried to mute them. They're after my attention.
You know what? I think we have your dial-in as well as your
sorry.
Don. That's okay. But anyway, how the bank acquired, I'm not sure at all.
This is what it is like. It's a senior Wednesday thing with Dawn and his dogs and his birds and.
Hi, Rosanna.
Oh, why? Oh no! See, you guys, I don't know.
Where's your video?
I don't know where. Can you see me?
No, we can't see you. Can you turn the video on?
Well, we don't know.
Oh, no, we do not allow.
My nurse is helping me. Because Jana, did you put me on?
There you are.
Oh, I don't see me. I'm on.
Not yet.
Yet.
Who's all there?
Can you not see everybody?
No.
You can't. Well,
okay,
we have Nellie, myself, and Ksenia, and Leslie, and Joanna, and Pat, and Carolyn, and Sarah, and Ellie, and Don, and Carter.
Okay. Because I guess it's
Mike.
There's so many. You have to just kind of.
Oh, we scroll.
Yeah. So that's a big little.
Everybody else. But yeah, if you scroll, you can see everybody.
Okay. Okay.
How do I mute myself so you don't hear me make commentary everywhere?
There's a little button at the bottom that says mute. It has a microphone, and it's right next to the video.
Okay. And then share video.
Or I can do it for you.
This is my first Chelsea.
Okay. So now that they should be able to see you, and now you just hit that button right there. And whenever it goes away, just tap the screen again and it'll come back.
Okay.
Okay, so tap the screen whenever you're ready to mute. Okay.
I think I got it. Thank you, Chelsea. Okay.
Oh, there
on, Jana?
We can see you, Ruth.
Okay, I better behave.
That's right.
Never have. Why would I? Okay, I'm sorry. I'll mute myself and listen to you guys' questions. Hi, Carter.
We
And
should,
all
we should all wish Carter a happy graduation, because he graduated in May and he's now moved himself out of Wichita, and we never got to throw him a party. So everyone wish Carter a happy graduation.
Happy
Thank
graduation.
you. Thanks, everybody.
Happy graduation, Carter.
Thank you.
We had a fantastic crop of interns this year. It was just amazing.
Without question, I heartily agree. And we have a new intern that just started with us last week, Samantha Carter. She's a graduate student, and so she's digging right in and getting started on K-12 curriculum. So we're thrilled to have her as well. Does anyone else have any questions?
I had another comment. Nellie had mentioned the Toy and Miniature Museum in Kansas City, and the fact that they had some of the, what is it, the Humpty Dumpty Circus?
Yep.
If you haven't been to that Toy and Miniature Museum, it's really pretty amazing place. It's worth the trip. I don't know if they're open because of COVID or not. I imagine they are, because it doesn't seem to get, terribly crowded, but very interesting, and a lot of toys that are very small.
Yes, that's one of the favorite museums of one of our collection artists, Randy Regier. He would also highly recommend that all of you visit the Toy Museum. Yeah. Anyone else?
If you're into pedal cars, the Sedgwick County Hysterical Museum has an excellent display on there right now. They had a display back in like '96 or something like that called Tot Rods, and this is an expansion of that. And they are open. Of course, you have to mask up and everything, and of course, it's not very crowded either, so social distancing is not a problem. But that's well worth seeing if you get a chance to go up there. I miss my museums. I miss my tours. I miss my kids. I miss.
I know.
Gosh, we got to get this taken care of. I
know. We're right with you on that, Dawn. And we are anxiously awaiting the day we open those doors back up.
Yeah, I'll bet.
I forgot to mention in my opening remarks that we do have Alice Aycock in the studio in the Gratefully Gallery. It is installed, it is ready to view, but we're doing it by appointment. So if you want to come see that exhibition, just call the main line, the main number for the Ulrich Museum, and we'll set up a time that you can come in and view it.
Good to know. Are we limited to the number of people we can bring in? Can 2 or 3 of us come in?
Yeah. But, we're going to request, social distancing and wearing a mask and all of that. So, and we'll have hand sanitizers on hand. But for the time being, all of us are working remotely for the most part. There are instances when we need to go into the museum, but we are working remotely, as you can see from my dining room table. But we're available at any time if anyone needs anything or has any questions, or just give us a call or shoot us an email. We are there. Now, has anyone gone and tootled around town and seen any of the billboards? Anyone?
We
Yes.
looked for them yesterday, but we didn't work in the right parts of town.
Well, we very, intentionally place them in diverse neighborhoods and, hit every area of the city to share with the entire community. So yeah, you do have to venture into neighborhoods that maybe you don't go very often to see them all.
I did it on a bicycle, Ellie. I rode to all of them on my bike.
Good for you.
She did. And I think it was 100 degrees that day.
Yeah, I almost like died, but you know, it was okay.
It was what, 21 and a half miles?
23.
23 miles.
Them all back to the hill crest.
So there's a challenge.
We definitely did it in a car, but it made me appreciate how big Wichita is and how there are really large swaths of it I'd never seen or visited.
Yeah, I would encourage all of you to go explore, you know, and see parts of the city that you don't, you know, see often. Because we all tend to live in our little enclaves of, you know, of Wichita. So yeah, that's good.
Like position them in places where you could pull up and get out and you could take a selfie, you know? So what's gonna happen, that's really cool, what's gonna happen is with the next round. So the next round will be installed first week of August, and they'll start filling in. So as you're going around to see them, there'll be more to see kind of in between the first 5. You know, they'll be filling in. But don't wait.
So next month for Senior Wednesday, we're going to have Jed Bodwin, who, of course, does Strange Currency on KMUW. And he's who I, you know, reached out to see if he might be interested in curating a Spotify playlist with the Billboard Project. So we're just about to release those first playlists, but he's going to join us and talk about that process and how he made his selections, and the history of the songs and artists that he selected and how it relates to the works on the billboards. So it should be really interesting. So I hope all of you can join us for that. Yes, thumbs up. Everyone will be there. Excellent.
Yes, thumbs up.
Excellent. And for all of my docents, I have missed you terribly, and I'm so happy to see all of you. And I'm so sorry that everything's on hold. But you know, let's talk about how we get together and how we continue to you know, prepare ourselves for the reopening. Okay.
That sounds great.
Now that you're all Zoom pros, we'll just do it that way.
Yeah, and pass the word on that, you know, we've got Senior Wednesday programming and it's great, and a whole bunch of other stuff lined up. We'll also have a new website up soon where many of you are featured. So look forward to that.
It looks amazing. You're going to love the new website.
Yeah.
Cool. Talking about great things, I didn't get a chance to mention to Nellie what a great job she did. And just very, very smooth, everything popping up when you said it would pop up, and your explanation of everything, you did fantastic.
Oh, thank you so much.
Hey, Nellie.
Yeah?
What got you interested in circus?
Well, I've been doing research for the On Vacation exhibit. So Ksenia and Jana just asked if I would do a presentation on Calder's work. And since the drawings in On Vacation are related to the circus, that's kind of what I decided to explore with this. So, yeah.
So it was Calder and not Circus. And Calder came first, and then you researched
Right,
Circus.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So just to remind everybody, we moved that exhibition that was scheduled for this summer to next summer. So you'll be able to see it and also enjoy the installation that Nellie did so much work on. So regarding the circus, and yeah.
Is there going to be any kind of a, when we get the ACOC sculpture up, will we be doing anything? Because that's going to be outside. Will we have any kind of a ceremony or get together or anything on that?
Well, we're inviting the public to witness the installation because it is outside and there's a lot of space. We're asking that everyone practice social distancing, and we'll have a tent and some chairs. But as far as a formal dedication, I'd like to wait until we can all get together. So it'll be down the road. Okay. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And we have some plaques we need to have made, and we want to wait till it's sitting there and there's some landscaping to figure that out. So, we want to do it right, Don.
Okay,
Yeah.
looking forward to it.
Great.
But be sure to register for Alice's virtual program on the 28th.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for setting up all these programs for virtual. This is going to be so helpful to those of us who've been staying home all the time.
We're so sorry, and we really do. We really miss you guys. And this is good. This is better than nothing.
Yes, yes.
See you. And no one has aged a bit.
Has aged. You can't get any older than I am.
I put on my quarantine 15 that I'm trying to work off now. I've got about 8 pounds of it worked back off.
Oh.
It happens, Well, I'm glad that you guys were our inaugural virtual program, and I could not have asked for a better audience to do this with.
Hey.
And I'm so glad it worked. I was a little nervous, I will admit. And hopefully all the rest will go as smoothly. It might be a little difficult to move everybody up to panelists if we have, 60 or 70 or 80 people joining us for some of these programs. So we'll see, but I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be great.
You can just use the chat more if you get a lot of people.
Yeah, we may have to, if we have that many number in attendance for some of our artist talks and lectures, we'll need to probably, just do a type in Q&A.
Would there be any consideration to continuing something along this line, maybe not every month or, every few weeks in the future after we're able to open up, because we're going to be having our friend Pat no longer local with us, maybe in the not too distant future.
Well, I think there's a lot of potential to continue virtual programming even after we open back up and we can all gather together in the galleries. I don't see any reason why we can't continue a virtual program.
Yeah.
That might expand our audience to, our friends that
are not local
anymore. Yeah. Without question. Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us today. It is so nice to see all of your faces. We missed you terribly, and hopefully, everyone will do their part and we'll get this back to normal. Right?
Yeah.
Hope so.
Yeah.
Uh-oh, got the dogs going.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Stay healthy. And hopefully we'll see you the 28th of July.
Great.
All right.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Nellie.
And
Thank you.
Good job, Nellie.
Thank you.
Good to see
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.